The Italian Reconnaissance pilot circles at 15,000 feet on November 11, 1941. Tenente Marco Rossi photographs the British convoy steaming east through the Mediterranean, counting ships and noting their positions for the raid that will come tonight or tomorrow. His camera captures merchant ships, destroyers, cruisers, and one battleship. The battleship's presence matters. It means heavy anti-aircraft fire, possible threat to Italian torpedo bombers, and reinforcement for British naval forces at Malta. The photographs will be analyzed by Italian intelligence. The battleship will be noted in reports, and operational planning will account for its presence. But the battleship is fake. HMS Centurion is a World War I dreadnought, stripped of her real guns and fitted with wooden replicas painted to look functional. Her boilers are removed. Her armor is thinned, and she is towed by tugs because her machinery is non-operational. She exists solely to confuse enemy reconnaissance, to make Italian planners believe British convoys are more heavily protected than they actually are, and to draw attacks that might otherwise hit more valuable ships. In 3 years, she will be deliberately sunk as part of the Normandy breakwater. Her final service as useful in defeat as her career as decoy was in deception. The fake battleship will demonstrate that sometimes the most valuable warship is the one that does not fight, but merely exists to be seen. That deception can be more effective than firepower, and that obsolete ships can serve critical roles when their purpose shifts from combat to theater, from destroying enemies to deceiving them into making mistakes that real warships will exploit. HMS Centurion was a King George V class dreadnought battleship commissioned in 1913 and designed for the battle line in the expected war against Germany. The specifications reflected the dreadnought era's emphasis on heavy guns and armor. Displacement: 23,000 tons standard, 25,700 tons full load. Length: 597 feet 6 inches. Beam: 89 feet. Draft: 28 feet 9 inches. Armament: 10 13.5-inch guns and 5 twin turrets. 16 4-inch secondary guns. Numerous smaller anti-aircraft weapons. Armor: 12-inch belt. 11-inch turrets, up to 4 inches on deck. The design was modern for 1913, incorporating lessons from earlier dreadnoughts and emphasizing balanced combination of firepower, protection, and speed. Power plant: 18. Babcock and Wilcox boilers, feeding Parsons turbines producing 31,000 horsepower. Maximum speed: 21 knots. Range: 6,700 nautical miles at 10 knots. Crew: approximately 750 officers and men. The ship represented state-of-the-art capital ship design when completed, but was already being superseded by faster super dreadnoughts with 15-inch guns. Centurion served with the Grand Fleet during World War I, participating in the Battle of Jutland in May 1916. Her role was part of the battle line, engaging German capital ships at long range. She fired 42 rounds of 13.5-inch ammunition during the battle, claimed hits on German battlecruiser Derfflinger, and sustained no damage. The battle demonstrated both the power and limitations of dreadnought combat. Massive firepower exchanged at ranges exceeding 10 miles with limited accuracy and inconclusive results. Post-World War I, Centurion remained in service through the 1920s, but was increasingly obsolete. The Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 limited battleship numbers and tonnage. Britain retained newer, more powerful battleships and designated older ships like Centurion for disposal or conversion. By 1926, Centurion was listed for scrapping or conversion to target ship. The conversion to target ship began in 1927. The real 13.5-inch guns were removed and replaced with wooden replicas. The armor was thinned to reduce weight and make the ship more vulnerable to testing weapons. The machinery was simplified, some boilers removed, and the ship was configured for radio-controlled operation so it could be maneuvered during gunnery practice without crew aboard. The conversion created ship that looked like battleship but could not fight, useful only for allowing other ships to practice shooting at realistic target. Centurion served as target ship through the 1930s, being shot at by the fleet's operational battleships during gunnery exercises. The practice built crew proficiency while preserving the appearance of battleship for potential deception purposes. By 1939, when war began, Centurion was worn-out target ship scheduled for disposal. But the Admiralty recognized potential alternative use. The concept of decoy ships had precedent, Q ships in World War I disguised merchant vessels carrying hidden guns to lure German submarines into surface gun duels. The deception worked until U-boats learned to torpedo suspicious ships without surfacing. Centurion could serve similar role, but as capital ship decoy, a ship that looked like Battleship from distance or in photographs, but existed solely to confuse enemy intelligence and draw attacks. The conversion to decoy ship began in 1940. The work was minimal. Centurion already had wooden guns in battleship appearance. Additional modifications created illusion of operational readiness. Canvas screens were erected to simulate crew activity. Fake fire control equipment was installed on superstructure. Signal flags and pennants were flown to suggest ship was under active command. Smoke generators created impression of boilers in operation. The goal was making Centurion indistinguishable from real battleship when observed from aircraft or at distance exceeding several miles. The mechanical limitations were severe. Centurion's boilers could not produce sufficient steam for independent movement. She required tugs for any voyage longer than harbor maneuvering. Her electrical systems were minimal, sufficient for lighting and pumps, but not for modern fire control or communications. She had no operational radar, no effective anti-aircraft armament beyond a few machine guns, and no damage control capability beyond basic pumps. If attacked seriously, she would sink quickly and ignominiously. But the deception did not require her to fight. It required her to be seen, to be photographed, to appear in intelligence reports, and to influence enemy planning. If Italian or German planners believed British convoy included battleship, they might deploy more forces, delay attacks, or target the fake battleship instead of real escorts. Any of these outcomes benefited the British. The first operational deployment occurred in 1941 during convoy operations to Malta. The Mediterranean was contested water. Italian Navy had numerical superiority. Italian and German aircraft could attack throughout the route, and British convoys suffered heavy losses. Adding a parent battleship to convoy escort might deter Italian surface action or draw attacks that would otherwise hit merchant ships. Centurion was positioned prominently in convoy formations, typically center of formation, where battleship would logically position to provide maximum anti-aircraft coverage. She flew Admiral's flag to suggest she was flagship. Her crew, reduced to approximately 300 men, mostly for navigation and basic ship handling when under tow, maintained appearance of active warship. Smoke from generators suggested boilers in operation. Signals were exchanged with other ships. The charade was maintained continuously, while in areas where enemy reconnaissance might observe. Italian reconnaissance did photograph Centurion on multiple occasions. The photographs show battleship in convoy formation, indistinguishable from operational vessel. Intelligence reports noted battleship presence. Whether this affected Italian operational planning is uncertain, but the potential for confusion was real. If Italian planners allocated resources to counter non-existent battleship, those resources were unavailable elsewhere. German air reconnaissance also photographed Centurion. Luftwaffe intelligence noted battleship in Mediterranean convoys and reported accordingly. The deception was successful in basic sense. Enemy reconnaissance reported what they saw without realizing it was fake. The operational impact was indirect and impossible to quantify precisely, but the cost was minimal and potential benefit was substantial. The most significant deployment came in 1944 during preparations for D-Day. The Allied invasion of Normandy required massive deception operation to convince Germans the landings would occur elsewhere. Part of this deception involved deploying Centurion as part of false convoy, suggesting landings would occur in Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. The operation, part of broader Operation Fortitude, involved fake radio traffic, dummy landing craft, and decoy naval forces. Centurion's role was being part of phantom fleet that German reconnaissance might observe, reinforcing impression that major naval forces were concentrated for Pas-de-Calais assault. The actual effectiveness is debatable. German intelligence was sophisticated and likely penetrated some deceptions, but Centurion contributed to larger pattern of false indicators that successfully convinced Germans to deploy forces away from actual invasion beaches. After D-Day, Centurion's final service was as part of the Mulberry Harbor breakwater. The Allies needed artificial harbors to unload supplies on invasion beaches. Part of the harbor design involved sinking old ships to create breakwater protecting the anchorage. Centurion was selected for this role, obsolete, already stripped of useful equipment, and conveniently positioned in England prior to invasion. On June 9, 1944, 3 days after D-Day, Centurion was towed to position off Normandy beaches and deliberately sunk. Her hull settled onto the bottom, forming part of the breakwater line that protected Allied shipping during cargo offloading operations. She remained there through the summer and autumn of 1944 as hundreds of thousands of tons of supplies flowed through the artificial harbor she helped create. Her wreck remains off Normandy today, visible at low tide, marked on charts as hazard to navigation. The hulk is corroded, broken, gradually disintegrating from decades of wave action. But the position remains. Centurion's final service was dying to create harbor that helped win the war. The assessment of Centurion's value as decoy is difficult. Deception operations are measured in enemy decisions influenced, resources misallocated, and attacks directed at wrong targets. None of these are easily quantified. Did Italian or German forces deploy differently because they believed Centurion was real battleship? Possibly. Did reconnaissance resources photograph Centurion instead of more valuable targets? Likely. Did operational plans account for battleship that did not actually threaten them? Perhaps, but the cost was minimal. Centurion was already paid for, already obsolete, already scheduled for disposal. Converting her to decoy ship required minor modifications and small crew. Operating her required tugs that would otherwise be employed elsewhere, but the additional cost was negligible. If the deception affected even single enemy operational decision, the return exceeded the investment. The broader context was that Britain in 1940 and 1941 was desperately short of operational warships. Every battleship was valuable. Creating impression of additional battleship through deception was force multiplier. Enemy had to plan against battleship that did not actually contest them, while real battleships were deployed, were actually needed. The deception freed real resources by creating fake threat. The concept of decoy warships continued beyond Centurion. Various vessels were modified to resemble more valuable ships. Merchant ships modified to look like aircraft carriers. Small warships painted to resemble larger ones. Dummy equipment installed to create false radar signatures. The principle was consistent. If enemy cannot distinguish real from fake, fake has value equal to cost of enemy response to it. Modern warfare has refined these techniques. Electronic warfare creates false signatures. Decoys attract missiles meant for real targets. Camouflage and deception remain fundamental to military operations. Centurion was an early example of principle that remains relevant. Appearance can be as valuable as reality when the enemy must respond to both identically. The crew who served aboard Centurion during her decoy period had unusual duty. They maintained ship that could not fight, participated in deception that could not be discussed, and faced danger from attacks against ship that could not defend itself. If Italian aircraft had attacked Centurion seriously, the crew's survival would depend on abandoning ship quickly. The anti-aircraft armament was token. The damage control capability was minimal. The ship would sink faster than operational battleship because the thinned armor and removed equipment meant less structural integrity. Yet the crew served. They maintained the charade because operational security required it. They stood watch on ship that was theater prop designed to deceive enemy. Their contribution to war effort was indirect but real. Every successful deception was victory achieved without firing shot. At 15,000 feet on November 11, 1941, Tenente Rossi photographed what he thought was battleship. His report noted battleship presence. His photographs were analyzed, and Italian planning incorporated information about British naval strength that included ship that could not actually fight. The deception worked, not because Centurion was convincing close inspection, but because close inspection was not available. From altitude or at distance, wooden guns looked like real guns. Thinned armor looked like full armor, and towed ship looked like independent battleship. HMS Centurion, the fake battleship with wooden guns and thinned armor, served 3 distinct careers: operational battleship in World War I, target ship in interwar period, and decoy ship in World War II before final service as breakwater component. Each career reflected different value proposition: fighting ship, training aid, deception asset, and finally construction material. The progression documented how military value is contextual. Centurion's worth changed as circumstances changed, but she remained useful until literally sunk for parts. The fake battleship demonstrated that obsolete platforms can find new purposes when creativity replaces convention. That deception can achieve effects that firepower cannot, and that sometimes the most valuable contribution is making enemy believe you are something you are not, forcing them to plan against threats that do not exist and deploy resources against targets that cannot hurt them. Centurion fought at Jutland firing real shells at real enemies. 25 years later, she fought in Mediterranean and at Normandy by simply existing and looking dangerous. Proof that in warfare as in life, perception can be as important as reality, when the audience cannot distinguish between them and must assume both are equally threatening. The wooden guns that could not fire were nonetheless effective because enemy did not know they were fake until too late to matter, demonstrating that the threat you believe exists shapes your decisions as much as the threat that actually exists, and that in the mathematics of warfare, fake battleship that influences enemy planning has measurable value, even if that value is impossible to calculate precisely, because deception's success is measured in things that do not happen rather than things that do.